Okay, everyone, so I'm going to talk today about one of the biggest mistakes people make, including people who are right now very successful, but often if they make this mistake, they are likely not to be successful in the future. What is that mistake? Now, as I've said many times before, human nature is more fearful than greedy, right? It's always easier to be where you are now as opposed to making a change. So for example, to give you some examples of how this manifests itself, if you're like most people and you book a hotel or a holiday and you have a great experience, right? You're really happy with it. You're very unlikely to leave a positive review unless you're asked to do it. In comparison, if you have a bad experience, you're much more likely to leave a negative review. Likewise, if you lose money, you're probably going to be more hurt than you are excited by gains. So this is called loss aversion, where kind of a negative experience or losing money is more painful than a positive experience is pleasurable. Now, what's interesting is this. When people become successful, some people become more greedy for more and more success, but some people kind of rest on their laurels and they allow risks to build up. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. Many people are focused on one country or one territory. And in certain situations, this is inevitable, right? For example, if you've got a factory, it's very unlikely, unless you're one of the biggest factories in the world, that you're going to open in 200 or something countries, right? It's just not viable. But let's say you're a service sector company. I've seen so many people assume the previous results will become the future reality. I'll give you a perfect example of this. I knew a guy who lived in Indonesia. Decade after decade, I think he was literally there for 30 years. He did incredibly well. But then in 2014, I think it was 2014 or 15, a combination of lower oil prices plus expat visas becoming more difficult affected his business a lot because he was in the expat niche. And it never occurred to him before, well, these things could happen. I've seen so many people who, and you're seeing it now with the virus, so many people say, oh, my business is suffering so much. But the way I would look at that is, well, why are you only focused on China? Even if you're a factory, surely you should have one factory in China and one factory somewhere else. And if you're in the service sector, even if you're doing incredibly well in China, you shouldn't keep all your resources in one country. And I saw it also in Japan, even though I wasn't living in Japan at the time, after the tsunami in 2011, also in Thailand during the coup in 2015. So what I'm going to say is, it sounds kind of obvious, but people forget it, is that even if a country is great as of today, or indeed 2021, you should always diversify your revenue in terms of the countries, and ideally you should have at least 2 or 3 products. Because for example, if you're a business which is doing 10% in China, of course it's not going to matter that much if only 10% of your revenue is based in China compared to a 60% or 80% is based in China. And likewise, this crisis is really showing that people should also rethink their business model. What's the one business model that's doing quite well during this present crisis? Those people who are at home. I was speaking to a good friend of mine a few days ago, and he has said that online schools in China are doing very well at the moment for obvious reasons, right? People don't want to leave their home and do classes face to face. Likewise, a business model like mine, which is obviously online, hasn't been affected just because, well, by definition, right? It's online. So in comparison, a lot of businesses that are focused on that traditional face-to-face approach, they are being absolutely hammered in places like China, Thailand, and whatever. Some people just can't deal with it, right? Imagine if your whole business model is based on face-to-face. And again, I'm not saying every business can just go seamlessly to being online. For example, if you're a hotel, yes, you might be able to sell some merchandise online. I think Marriott, Hilton hotels, whatever, they do sell some like side services online. But of course, you can't have an online hotel, right? By definition, you can have online booking online. But a lot of businesses out there, they could do more things online, but they don't want to do it. And why don't they want to do it? Because they think, well, I'm doing well now. But then what happens is, like now in China, or indeed in Japan in 2011 after the tsunami, or Thailand after the coup, or in Egypt in 2011, people suddenly rush and say, oh, I should be online, or oh, it was a bad idea, don't you think, to just be in one country? But the key is prior preparation. So even if your business is doing incredibly well right now, the best thing to remember is this. Mark Cuban the Shark Tank billionaire, actually had a great quote when he said, ask yourself this question: what would I do if I was a competitor to put myself out of business? So now, if you've got a private business now, think to yourself, if I was my worst enemy, how would I put myself out of business? Or for that matter, what risks exist? So even if your business is doing incredibly well, if you're just in one country, that's a big risk. If you're selling just one service or product, that's a big risk. If you are just dependent on face-to-face, that's a big risk. Because yes, this virus will come and go, but in 2025, 2030, 2035, whatever, new things will come. That's just the way life is. So you always want to recession-proof your business. You always want to make your business not reliant on one country, one product, one service, and so on.